In olden days, a glimpse of stocking was looked on as something shocking. Now heaven knows anything goes. Good old days told once new better was now only used for afterwards when hiding clothes. Anything goes, and the world is gone back to days.
Welcome to On the Mark, a new series here at 89.5 FM WSKB and Westfield Community Programming Channel 15. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Goes is our chief engineer today. And on today's program, we're going to be chatting about and with first responders. We've heard a lot about them, especially in light of the pandemic, and people that are in the front lines, keeping us safe, helping us heal, and putting their lives on the line to make sure that our lives are better. So we've got three great guests today. Our first is a ER doc who has Westfield ties, Dr. Brian Sutton, and he's joining us from Bay State Health. Brian, it is great to chat with you.
Good morning, Mark. Good to chat with you. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
Yeah, very well. Staying COVID-free, I hope.
Yeah, I hope. And for you, that's quite a challenge because you're seeing patients every day.
We are, and since the pandemic began, we've had to pivot and flex and change the way we do things more than once. In March, when we started seeing patients that were coming through our doors that had flu-like illness but had a negative flu test, we at that point decided that this coronavirus is here, and then that point we had to kind of go into a lockdown and prevent patients from entering, who might be potential COVID patients into the clinics, the urgent care clinics that we have in Westfield, Feeding Hills, and Long Meadow. We had signage, and we still have signage where we screen everybody now. We've been open throughout the pandemic, but we screen every patient now for any kind of potential or possible COVID-19 infection.
How did you get involved in emergency medicine and being on the front lines? What made you choose that discipline?
Well, I couldn't sing or dance coming out of high school, Mark, so I had to do something, right?
Exactly.
So, I had some people in my life that were inspirational that steered me toward medicine. And when I was in medical school, after rotating through all the clerkships, I thought, wow, I really like a little bit about everything here: medicine, surgery, pediatrics, gynecology, neurology, psychiatry. So I just thought, so I asked my advisor, well, what should I do, And he said, well, you're probably going to be, you probably want to go into emergency medicine. Why don't you schedule a rotation? And the rest is history.
What draws you to it as opposed to the other disciplines?
For me, it was the variety and the early in my career was, I guess, the adrenaline rush of not knowing what the next patient coming through the door was going to be, and then being able to kind of think quickly on your feet and make a decision that could save someone's life, and that's I guess the draw for pretty much all of us who kind of gravitate or go toward emergency medicine. Now that decision for me was about 30 years ago, and my career path has gone from 20 some odd years at Noble Hospital in the emergency department now to and now it's Bay State Noble, of course, but more an administrative role now in the urgent care side of things, which for me is an extension of the emergency department. We see the less acute stuff that should probably not be triaged to in an ED. So but it's funny because even in the urgent care, kind of too sick to be here, we need to get them to where they need to be.
Yeah, I pass your urgent care center frequently because it's located next to a Starbucks, which, I see the people coming in and out and going in with their injuries that normally would have gone to the ER at Bay State or Mercy or one of these places. So you're helping to send the real emergencies to trauma centers, and you're helping with the other things. When COVID arrived, were you guys prepared for this, or did this take you by surprise?
It's, I belong to a professional society, still in emergency medicine, ASEP, and they were on top of it, and they were on top of it early in sending us alerts about what potentially we might see as far as numbers and acuity and morbidity and mortality on this thing. So professionally, myself, I think I was ready, but institutionally, we were caught a little bit by surprise with regards to not having enough personal protective equipment to handle the recommendations from the CDC. So we were short on masks, and the N95 mask in particular was in shortage, and we were flexing and pivoting with the CDC guidelines about how to find ways to reuse these things. Luckily, we had enough gloves, and we never ran out of gloves. But gowns were in big shortage early in the pandemic. Finally, the manufacturing is caught up for gowns that one person, one patient, one use, and then dispose. So yeah, and then eye protection. I think we were pretty good as far as that, and we're right now we're girded for the next wave, and I think right now we're with the personal protective equipment, but in the beginning, no, that was a big issue for us.
We're here in November, late October, early November, and the first big wave is past, and there's talk that there will be another wave. Are you guys prepared for a second round, and do you think that if the public were to be more responsible and wear masks whenever they're out there and to use disinfectants and stuff, that we can keep the numbers down?
I do. I think a lot more is known now than it was in February and March. The science is just it's so rapid fire information available now, where 10 years ago we'd have to wait for something to get published in a journal, and then everybody would get a copy of it. Now everybody can see those online the minute that the stuff gets published. So we have up to the minute access, thanks to the internet, on for up to the minute therapeutics and up to the minute diagnostic technology right at our fingertips, on our smartphones, where we can look things up where and things have changed, and guidelines change day to day, week to week, based on new information, new scientific information that's come down the pike. And so we're much better prepared here in November than we were in February and March, when we're dealing with a novel virus, and not a lot was known about, except for the early scientific data coming out of Wuhan, China. And now we have every country in the world affected by this, in the scientific community in every country pooling information to really battle this. And I think we're much better prepared.
If a vaccine comes out, and they're saying that it could be by the end of 2020 or early 2021, how long will that vaccine need to be out before the public gets vaccinated and before people can resume some sense of normalcy, like going to restaurants, going to theaters, and things like that?
That's a great question, and it's going to be. I know that there's talk of accelerate. This is an accelerated process compared to previous vaccine testing and trialing, and so will we have an effective vaccine? Well, I think we have at least a half dozen candidates for an effective vaccine out there, and now it's just a matter of getting those phase 3 trials to see whether or not it's, number one, is it a safe vaccine for people? Whether side effects that are untoward that may be worse than the disease itself. So that data is unknown. And will it be an effective vaccine? Is it going to the spread or prevent the inoculation? And so I trials with primates, you can't really they're unethical. These studies are unethical to do in humans, whereby you vaccinate someone and then expose them to the disease to see if they get it or not. I know in other countries that's done, but not here in the U.S. It would never pass an ethics board.
Yeah.
We're going to have to rely on other nations' data, but also the trials that are happening with in our own scientific community and computer mapping because we have the human genome map now, and some of these computer do for us to really to roll this out.
Yeah. Are there other nations working on vaccines? We tend to hear about American drug companies and pharmaceuticals that are working on it. Are there other nations that you're aware of that are on the race as well?
Yeah, China and Russia are both vaccinating people now with what they've got. I know that Putin was on record a few weeks ago talking about it, how they've got a vaccine, and I think they bypassed a phase of trialing the vaccine, and they're distributing it right now. So we'll see. We'll have to keep an eye on that.
Yeah. So once the vaccine becomes available, how do you, as a physician, convince the public to take it? Because there are all these anti-vax people out there. But ideally, if the population in general takes it, we wipe out COVID. But if a lot of people are resistant to taking a vaccine, COVID is still present.
Well, I think we go back to the safety issue. We want a safe vaccine to administer to the general population with as few side effects as possible and effective. We need there's different vaccine technology that we didn't have for some of the vaccines that are out there now. There's a messenger RNA vaccine that at least 2 of the pharmaceutical companies are developing, and that's a different technology, and it may or may not enhance the effectiveness of the vaccine to fight to fight this virus once you get it in your system. So the vaccine is the old vaccines were, or for instance, the flu vaccine is inactivated influenza particles of the virus that are replicated synthetically, that are now part of a broth that is dispensed in these small aliquots in the 0.5 mLs as a vaccine. And so you're exposed to last year's flu and all the strains that have been out there for the last, how many years. And they chop them up into these particles and they replicate them, and those particles get into your system and your bloodstream and stimulate your immune response. And but some of the new vaccines have different ways of working inside the cell, and it's going to be exciting to see if these are going to be breakthroughs in the science, the science of vaccines.
Let me go back to another question here. You are technically a first responder. People are in crisis and they come to you, and you've had your successes treating patients, and you've also, I assume, have had failures where somebody has passed away or gotten worse under your watch. That would be just part of the job. How do you buoy yourself to go to work every day and face these challenges? What's in it for you personally?
Great question. In that, I think like never before we're seeing physician suicide and physician depression kind of reach an all-time high in this country, and so I think being aware that there are resources for us, and like like I said, all the physicians, most of us belong to some sort of organization or professional organization, and to have those resources to like, as you use your words, buoy us up in case we find ourselves in a mental health crisis. I can call a hotline, and I can be referred immediately to a counselor either via live or telehealth. And then there's also peer-to-peer counseling that's available, that other emergency physicians, or if you're a surgeon, other surgeons who may have gone through similar things. Those are available as well. And I just think that right now there's much more awareness, and there's less stigma, Mark, for physicians, nurses to reach out and use those resources for mental health.
If someone were to ask you, somebody that was considering medicine as a career, or someone who had treated you, say, what is in this for you? What do you gain from your career? What makes you want to go back every day and treat patients? What is it in it? What is it that drives you along?
I think it goes back to the question they ask you when you apply to medical school or nursing school or PA school, or any medical career. It's like, why do you want to do this? And if your first answer is because I want to help people, if it's not that, then you really have to kind of reevaluate why you're doing it, because that's the answer. Your motivation is your motivation that you've had from day one. It's you want to help your fellow man, your fellow woman. You want to help people get through and get better and heal. And that's just a motivation that stays with you and lasts a lifetime. And that's, it brings you back to the job every day.
When did the reality of what you were getting into actually hit you? When you started medical school, when you first got into the hospital, when did you first realize that this is a lot more and more challenging than I ever thought it might be?
So I think the first couple of years of medical school are similar to like class, where it was didactics and listen to lectures, read the text, study for the tests. But then the first day of the third year of medical school, you get your little short white clerk's coat, and you get a dress code, and you brush off your stethoscope that you've got for a graduation present, and then all of a sudden you're thrown onto the hospital floor, and then you have an intern or a resident barking orders at you, go do this, go do that, and you just boom, you're hit the floor running. And I remember my first rotations as a third year medical student, that my head swimming, just kind of thinking about all the responsibility and the new world you had to adapt to, versus classroom versus, okay, this is it, you're actually going to touch a patient.
Now you've done most of your career here in Western Massachusetts and all of that. What makes you stay here? What made you choose a smaller location as opposed to going to one of the big medical centers in Boston or New York?
Yeah, that's a great question. I did medical school in Worcester, and got married during medical school, and then we decided when it was time to do our training and residency, my wife and I decided we wanted to check out a different part of the country. So we did it in California. I did my residency in California, and so we definitely considered staying out in California because we had gotten used to warm weather and the lifestyle. But family mostly, was a big reason for coming back to the 413. Now, I did take a little bit of a sabbatical after training. You know, we did a year down in Honduras as medical mission for 1996-97. But yeah, my first gig was Noble Hospital, and that was 96, 97 when I got back in 97 full time.
And then history was made.
Yeah, and then up till 2013, 14, I was full time in the emergency department. And then transitioned between 18 and 28, and still working part time in the emergency department, but starting in 2018, a couple of years ago, it's been full time administrative urgent care, and then I still work clinically here a couple of days a week. I'll spread over the 3 clinics in Long Meadow, Feeding Hills, and here in Westfield.
Well, Brian, thanks for joining us. We've been chatting with Dr. Brian Sutton, who's with Bay State Health's Urgent Care Program. Thanks for being a part of this. We're going to acknowledge our underwriters, and we'll be back with Brendan Monahan and later on Ben Jacek. So don't go away. This is On the Mark. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. I'm Mark Auerbach. You're listening to us or watching us on either Westfield Community Programming Channel 15 or 89.5 FM WSKB.
Underwriting is brought to you by Boise Cascade Distribution, providing products and services needed for building material dealers, home improvement centers, and industrial customers. They offer everything from engineered wood and plywood to Drex decking and railing, James Hardie siding, and Advantech subfloor. Located at 33 Fowler Street Extension in Westfield and on the web at bc.com, they are committed to providing quality products, great service, convenience, and value.
Underwriting support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Greater Westfield Chamber of Commerce, the voice of business for the Greater Westfield communities. Informing, educating, advocating, the Chamber provides opportunities for members to make meaningful connections on local, regional, and state levels. For more information on the Chamber's many events, workshops, and programs, as well as the benefits of membership, visit westfieldbiz.org. The Chamber focuses on the most important economy, yours.
Hi, this is Harry Rock, host of Rock on Westfield every 4th Wednesday at 8 a.m. Tune in for my view of this place I call home.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 at 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back, everyone, to On the Mark. I'm Mark Auerbach, your host. Peter Coles is our chief engineer, and today we're spending an hour chatting with first responders and people who work with them. Our next guest is Brendan Monahan, who is a local from the 413. He's involved in PR and healthcare, and some of you may remember him from being a reporter on ABC Channel 40 WGGB or whatever, Western Mass News. Good morning, Brendan.
Good morning. How are you, Mark?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
I wanted to chat with you. A lot of people know you from seeing you on TV here, but you left the market and moved on to Boston and then got into the public relations and the healthcare side of things. So how did your life move on from television in the 413?
Yeah, I think, it was certainly an adjustment coming out of the very fast-paced and sort of rapidly changing, newsroom environment to more of a corporate environment. So that was a very unique sort of adjustment. But I really sort of fell in love with working in and around healthcare, and I've been blessed to have a really fulfilling and satisfying PR career focused on healthcare since I left TV. My years in TV were fantastic and really awesome, and provided great insight into the life of first responders and the challenges and obstacles they face. And so now I get to work with them in a different context.
So how do you work with them now in the public relations world?
So currently, so over the past 5 or 6 years, I worked at Bay State, and when I left the market, I went to Dana-Farber in Boston, and now I represent several Boston Boston area hospitals, including Tufts Medical Center, and a large urgent care chain that goes throughout the Northeast called Physician One Urgent Care. And, so we work with them on sort of beyond just the obvious of getting them publicity and trying to, drive business objectives that you need to keep the lights on. We work with them about crafting their story and showing the humane side of the really important and great work that they do, and kind of informing them as to how what may seem like a small or almost meaningless action within their interaction of a patient can make the difference in the perception of that patient and that provider or the entire organization. Generally speaking, I think we've learned over the years that when a patient comes to a hospital or comes to an urgent care or even, gets picked up by an ambulance, they expect that the paramedic or the nurse or the doctor knows what they're doing, just like you expect that a teacher knows how to teach. What really sort of makes the difference between a positive and a mediocre, and even more so a negative experience, is the compassion, the interpersonal interaction, making someone feel that you understand what they're going through, that they're respected, and that they're part of the decision-making process in their health. So we work on all those types of things.
Do you think that the pandemic has brought a greater appreciation for first responders, or do you think that it's just helping the public discover what first responders really put up with and do?
I think that it's brought certainly more of an appreciation, probably both. I think it's brought appreciation and a greater insight into the fact that, there's people in all of our lives who, generally speaking, we all know someone, or most of us know someone who's a first responder, and you sort of often take for granted the work that they do, whether that is a police officer who's putting himself or herself in danger, or a nurse, or anyone else. And I think, firefighters and police officers, it's inherently sort of known the dangers that exist. I think that what this has done is shown or reminded people that there's a lot of other dangers out there. And, long before and long after the pandemic, there's plenty of other infectious diseases and pathogens that could be dangerous to a nurse, a doctor, or any staff member in a hospital or medical environment. And they take on that risk every day, usually without fanfare. And so this has, I think, shined the light on that.
And one of the things that I'm curious about is, I see all these stories, and I think the media has really gone out there, whether it's television or radio or print, to tell the stories of the first responders. And we oftentimes think of just the doctors or the nurses that are or the paramedic, the people you see first. But one of the things that I'm learning as a reporter is there are the people behind the scenes. There are the aides, the kitchen workers, the people, the secretaries, and the other people that support them, that are putting themselves on the line just as much as the doctors and the nurses. Are there any stories that you've learned in the last few months that have really been kind of mind-altering for you?
Oh, yes, certainly. I think that, it's remarkable. For instance, this has brought on a situation, or it's not brought on, but it's highlighted along the existing challenge that most hospitals face. How do you go about safely parking someone's car who's too ill to trudge through a parking garage when they show up at the hospital suffering from COVID-19? The folks who sign up to be valet service employees, don't prepare themselves and don't deserve to be exposed to infectious disease like COVID any more than anyone else does. And, that's something that people take for granted, that when you pull up to the hospital, at most hospitals, like at Bay State Medical Center, that there's a valet there to serve you and take your car so you can just focus on getting inside and getting the care you need. So then you have to look at all those folks, and they have unbelievable stories of the valet people at the hospital in many ways are truly the front line of care, and they're often very much overlooked. And so there's all sorts of folks like that. You can't go into a room until it's been cleaned and disinfected, but somebody has to do that work. You have to eat and drink to get better, and someone has to prepare and bring you all those things. And those aren't, glorified jobs, but they're absolutely essential. And the more people can remember that, the better the world can be.
How did you get the interest in dealing with healthcare? I mean, you started out, I assume, wanting to be a journalist and a reporter, and then you made this transition. What made you make the transition?
Yeah, so ironically, for one of my assignments at ABC 40, I went to Bay State Medical Center and I spent the night with a trauma surgeon, Dr. Andrew Dobin, and I just chronicled his life and his typical day working, and we went to, with, of course, under the HIPAA regulations and everything, and we went to several trauma pages that came in of folks who had been in accidents and stabbings and all that kind of stuff. And so I was just kind of taken by the environment at that point, and the sort of the massive operation that it is to run a 24-hour caregiving environment. And I was fortunate enough to get a job when one opened up at Bay State as the manager of public affairs.
So, Bay State has really seen more than its amount of COVID people, and has really risen to the occasion on so many levels. I assume that the people that you're working with in Boston have been able to do that as well. But have you found that the hospitals have been overwhelmed, or do you think that they've been able to get the resources that they need?
So I think that, had we not, there's virtually no question, had we not prepared the way we did in March and April for the late April and May surge that existed, the hospitals would have been wildly overwhelmed. Many units that, serve typically other functions were converted to COVID units. The field hospitals certainly helped. So I think that I do think, anyone who needed care got care, I would say, across the state. It may not have always been in the ideal setting or even at the ideal time, but it certainly could have been a lot worse had the preparation not been there. And I think they learned a real lot in the event that there was to be a second surge or, God forbid, any other pandemic down the road.
Yeah, do you think, people seem to be predicting that a second surge is along the way. Do you feel that your clients are prepared for it, and will they have the equipment, everything from the masks to the protective things that they need if a second surge comes around?
Yeah, so, my clients essentially what they've done is, the first surge kind of came quick. And it took a lot of work to get to the point where they were able to handle it. In the days thereafter, thankfully, some things have slowly returned to some degree of normalcy, although not the same. But at the same time, they're always one day away from implementing the plans they had going in the spring in the event that they need to. So they never, sent back the supplies or stopped ordering them or put them away in a place that it will take 2 weeks to get them out of storage. Everything's in place and ready to go. And, I do think that they're ready for it. And I do have to say, I think, Governor Baker and his administration in this state they've done all that they possibly can to assist these hospitals. And it's a massive complicated process. But these hospitals are facing a lot of challenges. When you eliminate virtually all of the services out of necessity for healthcare that generate your revenue, and you increase your expenses to meet the demands of the pandemic, that's a tough recipe for financial stress. And the state has really tried to step up and help as much as they can. I think now the state is sort of maxing out, and they need help from the federal government. So, the goal of a hospital is always to have the lights on and the doors open 24 hours, 7 days a week for you to come in when you need it. But behind the scenes, there's a ton of work that goes into making that financially feasible.
Now, you as a PR person, I do PR as well, so I know that for me, social distancing and working remotely, it's changed my whole work schedule and work regime, and I would assume it has done similarly for you. How do you feel going out there in the field and into the hospitals these days as part of your work? Do you feel safe? Can you let your guard down a little bit in terms of social distance, or are you still maintaining all the things that everybody says you need to do?
I'm personally, and my family we're pretty much still maintaining it. I think that, we do have a circle of people that we feel comfortable with, and I think that as it gets into later in the fall and the winter, we'll probably decrease that circle. Certainly mask wearing. I feel comfortable in the hospitals, to be honest with you, because there is such a tremendous effort to prevent unnecessary spread of COVID-19 that in many ways I feel that the hospital is one of the most safe environments in public. I was in the hospitals during COVID and everything, and I was on COVID floors and trying to get the stories of first responders out there, trying to get the images both verbally and through photographically out into the public to see what was happening there, and to get the attention that's necessary for the virus. And so I felt safe even then, because they really every measure was taken to make sure things were safe. But I would love to go back to my office, I can tell you that.
Yeah. Is there one hero or heroine that you've learned about during the last few months, that a story that you were really proud to get out there?
Yeah. So, it's hard for me to identify one person in this process, but I can, one caregiver, but there is one patient I can identify, and that's a mom. So here in Boston, there was a mom from out in Central Mass who admitted herself to, showed up at a local community hospital and was in dire straits. She was pregnant with twins, not doing well. She was immediately transported to Boston to Mass General Hospital, and she was. The doctors, have told her she was on death's door. The odds of her surviving were extremely low, and because of that, they decided they needed to deliver those babies prematurely just to try and save them. And so they did that while mom was on a ventilator. They went ahead and got the babies, and then they didn't feel they were afraid of not having enough ventilators at Mass General, so they ordered 2 ambulances, and the care teams got in the ambulances, and they drove over to Tufts Medical Center, which is my client, and Tufts Children's Hospital, and they admitted the babies into the NICU for about 6 weeks. I had the distinct pleasure of telling that story through the great press in Boston, because mom actually was saved by Mass General and is fully back to good health, with very little lingering issues and deficits, and the babies were saved as well, very premature, and they recently were all discharged. The babies were discharged from the hospital. Mom was discharged a while ago, and they're back home with their dad and a very happy family in Central Mass. But there were perilous moments there when the odds were tremendous that both the mom and the babies were not going to live. And between 2 hospitals working together with an EMS system in Boston, they were able to save all 3. And, that gives, I think, people hope that even when when patients with this virus are in their worst straits. You can't give up on them.
Brendan, thanks for joining us. We've been chatting with Brendan Monahan, who is a public relations in healthcare in Boston. Many of you will remember him from his television reporting and anchoring days at ABC 40. We're going to take a break to acknowledge our underwriters, and we'll be back with the rest of our program on first responders with Benjamin Jacek after a few announcements, so don't go away.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Westfield Bank. For more than 160 years, Westfield Bank has been an important community presence and commercial leader in the Pioneer Valley. With convenient full banking services in Westfield, West Springfield, East Longmeadow, Agawam, Feeding Hills, Springfield, Southwick, as well as Enfield and Granby, Connecticut, visit us on the web at westfieldbank.org.
Support for community radio on WSKB is provided by Betts Plumbing and Heating Supply Company, an independent, family-owned wholesaler serving Westfield for over 50 years, specializing in plumbing, heating, and industrial piping supplies. On the web at bettsplumbing.com or at 14 Coleman Avenue in Westfield.
This is Ken Stomsky from Ken's Den on WCPC 15 and 89.5 FM, Tuesdays, 8 to 10.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM, WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to On the Mark, a new program here at Westfield Community Programming Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB. I'm Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer, and our guest on this program about first responders is Benjamin Jacek, who is an EMT, a firefighter, and a third-year student at the University of Wyoming in Laramie. Ben and I have known each other for quite a long time. He works part-time for my company doing some social media for some of my clients, but I've known Ben since he was in high school, and he had this dream of becoming a first responder and an EMT and a firefighter, and off he went to, right after high school graduation with an EMT certificate in hand, went off to Wyoming, where he subsequently became a firefighter and an EMT as a freshman in college, and one of the youngest people to join the fire department there. And I've got to say, in a moment of transparency, Ben and I have been close friends ever since he was in high school. It's good to chat with you, Ben.
It's good to talk to you too, Mark.
How are you doing out there?
Oh, doing good.
Now, we talked a couple of weeks ago, and you had told me that you were out there fighting a forest fire, and when you described the size of it, it was something like, you said, 50 square miles, which in our area would be something like Westfield to Lead, North Adams to Greenfield and down, a big square. How has that turned out? Was that fire in control now?
Unfortunately not. The winds shifted again, and it got bigger. So we have containment on some of it, but not all of it.
And how often are you able to go out there and work with your crew?
It depends on the week. The first week I was out there for a while, most of the week, and then it's kind of calmed down. We crew swapped so I can come back into town and work on school. But I'm starting to go out there again next week.
And so you're kind of, it's a real balancing act for you then between being an EMT, being a firefighter, and a full-time student.
Oh, yeah, it's a big balancing act. Basically, it ends up being a lot of late nights.
Yeah. How do you do it? Do you really regimen yourself to get your sleep and eating and school schedule in, or do you just take it as it comes?
I'm trying to plan, in advance. Like generally I have my schedule built about a week in advance of when I can fit everything in, and I try and follow that to the best I can. Obviously it can change with being held over or something like that if I'm working, but generally it works pretty well with having a schedule.
We've been talking on this hour program. I know you weren't listening in for the first two segments, but we've been talking with first responders and why they get into it. You became interested in being a first responder when you were like a mere teenager. How did that come to be? What made you decide this is something you wanted to do?
I've always just been around this field like most of my life. I mean, growing up with my dad being a first responder and my uncle being a first responder, and it's just always been something I've been around, and I've always found interest in the big, fancy red trucks, so to speak. And so it's just something I kind of wanted to try out, and I really enjoyed it, so I just decided to stick with it.
But you have a compassion that most people your age didn't have. I mean, how many people in your high school class, for example, were interested in doing this kind of work? Did you feel that you were like one of a kind, or were there other people as well?
Coming out of high school, I don't know the numbers of how many have decided to join this field, but I can say for my department, at least right now, we have a decent amount of people like me that are relatively around my age, and we're all interested in this field and doing our best that we can.
But if I recall correctly, when you started and you went to Laramie, the Laramie daily newspaper, I think it's called the Boomerang, did a story about the volunteer fire department that you were working with, and said that you were the youngster and the youngest to join. And when we chatted on a series called How We're Doing, which aired here back in the spring, others had joined on. You were no longer the youngest. Is the fire department and the EMT continuing to recruit young people?
Yes. Each year we try and recruit in the fall, and get personnel in the fall so we can train them up so they start in the spring online or in service. And we just started another academy this fall, and there are some younger people as well as some people that live here and have lived here. So
when we talked in the spring on the series How We're Doing, and I got to say that if people wanted to catch the interview that you and I had the good fortune to do, it's on the YouTube channel on the WSKB Community Radio site on YouTube. The pandemic had really just begun to spread into Wyoming. So here we are chatting 6 months later. How tough has the pandemic and the COVID situation been, and how much have you been involved with it over the last 6 months?
I've been involved a decent amount. I've been working on the ambulance and doing that kind of stuff. It's here, but it's not near where some of the more hotbed areas are. We obviously have it same as everyone else, but we've done a pretty good job of encouraging people to social distance and wear their masks and kind of just not be as gathering as they would be, and it's been working pretty well.
Yeah, I was going to ask if people were compliant or whether there were reckless people that just said, I don't need to wear a mask.
I mean, you always have people that are kind of hesitant to wear their masks or, for whatever their beliefs are. But for the most part, people have been following the recommendations of the CDC and the state of Wyoming and doing their part to help out.
Have you been provided with appropriate and enough supplies to do your job? I know that so many at the beginning of the pandemic, particularly in the hospitals on the East Coast, were short on masks, short on protective equipment. By the time the pandemic got to Wyoming, were you guys covered?
Oh, yeah. We kind of saw the writing on the wall, so to speak, coming out of the East Coast and placed orders and tried to get ahead of it, and we were able to, at least for my agencies that I work for, we were able to, keep PPE in stock and kind of stay ahead of the supply chain, so to speak.
Now, you've been interested in being a first responder since you were a young one, and continuing to do it. How have your expectations changed based on your experiences? Is this more than you thought it might be when you got into it, or is it sort of where you think you ought to be?
Honestly, my expectations haven't changed. This is something that it's not an everyday occurrence, but it's not something that you totally should discount in this field. It is a possibility that you could have something like this. That's why we have done trainings on this stuff in the past, and unfortunately, we've had to use that training. But it's something that it's not expected, but it's not not trained on, I guess.
Okay. Have there been any experiences that you've had that reinforce for you personally, either a success or something that turned out well, that have continued, that inspire you to keep going?
Yeah, I've had a couple different patient interactions a couple months ago. During the more active times here, and it was very gratifying to see that we were able to render the best care we could, and it helped their outcome and made them feel a lot better. And you could see that look in their eyes of thank you so much, and it was pretty gratifying.
So in other words, you've had that opportunity to feel appreciated.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question, Ben. If somebody who was in high school now came up to you and said, I think I want to be a first responder, what do I need to have, or what skill sets do I need to have to do it? And how do you maintain an equilibrium in your life as a first responder so you don't let your work get you down? What would you tell them?
Honestly, time management is super important. That's how I am able to do what I do. But going into it, honestly, as long as you have a drive and a passion for helping people, the departments that you're interested in, they'll teach you the rest. The skills can be taught, but if you have that drive that people, you really want to help people and you want to make a difference, then that's the biggest thing.
And do you feel the when do you feel the satisfaction of making the difference? What does it for you?
Honestly, just every day. Just being able to be with my brothers and sisters on the rigs and helping out where I can, and it's just honestly that's the best feeling.
Now I know that you've got a couple of years of schooling left, and you're also getting constant training as a first responder. What are some of the training programs that you've had to go through to keep yourself in line with what's going on?
Mostly personal protective equipment, retrainings, refittings to make sure everything's still properly fitting, and then various updates as they come out from the CDC. We have to take online computer trainings to learn about the different changes, and then we have some trainings on if we're going to be doing more of the public standby side of things, on how to properly do some of the stuff that we're expected to do there.
And you spent some time this summer being trained outside of Wyoming. Was that for EMT work or was that for firefighting? What kind of training was that?
I actually wasn't trained outside of Wyoming this summer. Everything got canceled because of COVID. I ended up doing a relief assignment basically to go help some agencies that were kind of getting overwhelmed with COVID.
So you got a chance to see what was going on not only in Wyoming, but in other parts of the country.
Yes.
Is there a problem in other places with getting enough equipment and supplies? And is there a problem among people? Are people following the guidelines, basically wearing their masks, social distancing, or is getting the word out of what's responsible difficult in different parts of the country?
Where I was, everyone was following the mask orders and everything because it was a state mandated thing, and luckily they had just acquired some shipping containers of PPE for us, so we had adequate PPE. But from my understanding, it had just gotten there as we were arriving.
And how do you clear your mind after you've been riding a fire truck all day or running people back and forth to the hospital and kind of stuff? Can you step back? Is there a way for you to relax and get away from the role of a first responder, or do you live it 24/7?
No, I mean, I come home and, I cook dinner and kind of like watch a movie or do some homework or that kind of stuff and just kind of take a break from everything else, and it generally de-stresses me. And if all else fails, I'll just go out into the woods and go fishing, or take some time away and just kind of focus on me.
Yeah, one of the things you had said that you wanted to go to college in Wyoming and far away so you could do the things that you like fishing, mountain climbing, and all of that. Have you had that chance to do all of that with your busy schedule?
Oh yeah, I mean, I try and go fishing once or twice every couple weeks, and try and go hiking when I can, and go visit with some friends, and kind of share in those adventures.
So, so first responding is only a part of your life.
Yeah.
Do you think it's important that people that are in your position of being a first responder find that work and play balance? Other first responders, are they overconsumed by what they do, or can they find the balance?
Most people do a good job of balancing their work with their home life, and it takes a little bit of time to figure out because the schedule is very different than any other job, especially you could be called in for overtime or something like that. But for the most part, once you kind of figure out how your schedules work with your agencies, you're able to focus on your life and kind of have that work-life balance like any other job.
When you got into this idea back in high school and you pursued it, and here you are many steps ahead just a couple of years later, are you glad you did it? And is the place where you're at now, is it what you expected, or did it exceed your expectations?
So I kind of knew what I was getting into a little bit just from talking to people and my ride-alongs and everything during my EMT class. But I love this job. I encourage everyone who's interested, try it. It's definitely not for everyone, but you may end up enjoying it just as much, and it's a great time. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of what I expected. I mean, I had a good understanding of what I was walking into when I walked through that door.
And it's gone the way you've wanted it to go, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Well, Ben Jacek, it's always great to chat with you, and I'm hoping you and I get a personal chat when you come home for the holidays. But we've been chatting with Benjamin Jacek, who is a student, third year at the University of Wyoming, who is a first responder almost full-time as an EMT and firefighter. And that brings us to the end of this edition of On the Mark, talking with first responders. Peter Coles has been our chief engineer today. We're broadcasting from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy on WCPC, Westfield Community Programming Channel 15, and 89.5 FM WSKB. We'll catch you next Wednesday with another edition of On the Mark. Thanks for joining us.
Other people's stories, other people's lives, socialites and film stars, girls cheating on their wives, debutantes in ball gowns, young and fancy-free, people on adventures, not me. Other people's intrigue, other people's sin. Why does David Niven live with Errol Flynn? Other people's secrets bursting to be told, hotbeds of excitement, mine's cold. Jean Cocteau and Jean Marais have fallen out with Charles Trenet. Frank Sinatra's in Montmartre in a silver Chevrolet. And where is Greta Garbo? And who is Howard Hughes? It's other people's stories and other people's news. You won't find my story in a magazine. A young girl from a convent, all of 17. Then she had a suitor, his beard was turning gray. Imagine her reaction, dismay. Mother said, be grateful, you're not to make a fuss. Love will happen later, that's how it was for us. Mother said, he's wealthy, be glad of what you get. Love will happen later, not yet. Other people's secrets bursting to be known. My mysterious husband has secrets of his own. Me, I have my daydreams until they all come true. Other people's stories will do.
She makes the starlight shine